Hello and welcome to the Not My Job Pod. I am your host, Emily Gant, and I am joined here today by Judge Julie Mathew, who is a guest I am super excited about because she is the first guest who is actually not a personal friend. So I found you through Instagram, but it is a pleasure to have you here, Judge Julie. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. Just as we get started, I've done a little bit of research on your history, but if you can give sort of a short introduction about yourself.
I've been elected to the bench in Texas in Fort Bend County since I was elected in 2018. So this is my seventh year on the bench. Every 4 years, I have to run. And my court is a general jurisdiction court. That means we handle civil, criminal, probate, guardianship, mental health, juvenile, you name it, we handle it. So it's my privilege being the judge in this county. It's about close to 1 million in population, and I'm one of the 6 county court judges. I'm also a mother, a wife, and an adjunct professor at the University of Houston Law School.
Wow. And I guess the question I always ask women in general is I feel like it's quite hard to balance all of those things, but I also hate that question because I feel like men never get asked that.
I mean,
But
we do. I mean, it is the truth of the matter. I think the amount of things that I juggle compared to my husband is quite a bit. There's no comparison.
was this something that you always wanted to do, like your whole life, or were you kind of like, no? Okay. So
No.
what is the path that brought you here?
So initially, I'll start with law school. I had no intention of even ever becoming a lawyer. But my dad had a business being an immigrant in the US and had some issues with his business partner, and I just saw their struggle. So, it dawned on me that if you know the law, no one can really take advantage of you. So that's the reason I went to law school. And the same thing, I've been kind of this person who always pushes for the underdog or somebody, always want to protect the rights of people type of thing. And just always, if I see something that I think is not right or not particularly, the way that it should be, I've always kind of stepped up. And so practicing as an attorney, I think I was an attorney for about 15 years. And, in my county, particularly as diverse as it is, we have about a 43% white, close to 20% African American, Hispanic, as well as Asian American. There was really very little diversity on the bench, if any at all. And so I felt that had to change, that the judiciary should reflect the community as a whole. Mahatma Gandhi's famous words, be the change that you want to see in the world. And I decided I'm going to do this. And so after much deliberation in 2016, 2017, I decided, and 2018, I did it.
Fantastic. And so, as a part of that elections process, was that a big part of your campaign strategy? Was sort of blending that, obviously very qualified to be here, but also, being a face that represents the diverse community that you want to serve?
Absolutely. I mean, that was a huge part of it as well. I am an immigrant myself, but this is my home and this is my country, and I hold the values that we have very dearly. And I took an oath as an attorney, as a citizen, to protect the Constitution, and I take it very seriously. And it was a 2-year process. It was not an easy decision because I had a 6-month-old, a year and a half, as well as a 12-year-old. And I also was a full-time attorney. So I had a lot of things I had to consider before coming to that. But I'm glad that I made that decision, because to be a role model, to be looked upon, to be able to guide or help, especially, you know, people that may not have had this exposure before. I'm very privileged to be here for it and very thankful.
There are a number of programs that you work on. Is that correct?
Yes.
That help a lot of younger people who are interested in this path who might not have heard about it before. Can you tell me a little bit more about some of those programs?
So I have a chai and chat series in the courthouse where the local community just gets to come into the courthouse, see what chambers look like. I think the first time I ever saw a judge's chambers was probably 5 or 6 years into practice. I've never seen one. Come into the courthouse, see what the holding cells like, what the offices are like, who is in the office. So that exposure. Then there is Kitchen to the Courthouse, where there's a series for young females or anyone for that matter who wants to come and see some of the folks who have broken through the glass ceiling. And I've had the NASA flight a director as one of our speakers, and I had a CEO of a hospital. So things that normally people wouldn't think to look at or aspire for. And so that's another one I have done. I am also part of the National Association of Women Judges, the Color of Justice program, where we give opportunities for females to come and listen to judges or legal experts talk about what they do in regard to their job and their daily life.
And when you were in training for this, how many years of law school actually is the prerequisite for just for becoming an attorney? It's quite long, isn't it?
It's 4 years of college. Law school is only 3 years. And then you have to take the bar. Currently, they have it that you can take the bar in all of the states. But when I was considering this, we had to take state by state. So I was licensed in Texas as well as Pennsylvania.
Okay. And throughout that whole process, did you have any like mentor or just someone that you were looking up to at the time? Or were you kind of completely paving your own way?
When I was looking at law schools, I did have mentors, but I think when I was looking to take the bar exam, I don't think I did. I went to school in Delaware, I grew up in Pennsylvania, which is close to Delaware, but I moved to Texas. So I really didn't have a good group of people holding me up. And I think any big decision that I would look, when I was running for judge, there wasn't a support. My parents were asking me, like, what exactly you're doing? What does this entail? They didn't even know. Nobody knew. And I kind of went in blind. I made the decision and figured it out as I went along as to what it entails.
As far as when you were like, okay, I'm gonna run, what were like the list of things that you thought you were gonna be responsible for versus, now you're in the position and sort of what does or how does the job differ from how you expected it to be?
You're constantly making decisions. When you walk in through the door, your staff is already asking you, what do you want to do? What do you want to do about a million things? And it's nonstop. There was a conference that I was picked as one of the judges to be at the National Computer Forensic Institute. And we had to pick like a leader of the group. And I was like, no way. I am have decision fatigue this week. I don't have to deal with kids this week. I don't have to deal with staff. I don't have to do anything. I'm not taking on one more thing. I think there is such a thing as decision fatigue, but I do love my job. It is an amazing. I mean, it's the best job I ever had. There's just no words to describe how I am very blessed to be here.
I'm curious to dive in a bit more about the decision fatigue. So you mentioned obviously that you're judging over a number of different case types. And so taking out, all of the day-to-day decisions that you have to make, but actually making decisions from specific court cases, or I guess, how do you deal with, I'm just projecting, I'm assuming that there would be a lot of anxiety in the process of making these calls.
Not particularly. I think you get to the day-to-day job, you handle it pretty well. I think when you first get on the bench, there's that like, oh, am I doing this right? And, I was a civil attorney. So dealing with subject matter jurisdictions that I've not necessarily done, it took a tiny bit of time to learn, and it's okay to accept the fact that you don't know everything or seek guidance or research and figure it out. I mean, no one is born with every skill set or knowledge. It's really about taking the time and figuring it out.
I would say I know next to nothing. I'm out of the US for a long time now, and not very familiar with the US court system. What happens? Like, if we make up an imaginary case where, I don't know, some young person is in trouble for doing something that was illegal, allegedly, and then they have a lawyer, they go into what is that? Are you the judge that's presiding over that? Is that somebody else who
So
how does it work?
I am the presiding judge in my court. If there's an attorney, if it's a criminal case, for example, a young person between the age of 10 and 17, that's a juvenile matter, then the attorney would then talk to the DA's office and see if there's something that they can work out, a plea deal or, some sort of a placement, or like figure out where we're going to go with the case. Are we going to go to trial? Is it something that they can work out some sort of probation? So all those things usually get worked out between the DA's office and the defense attorney who's handling the matter. So I get involved when if there is some sort of an agreement, as to how to proceed with the agreement, or if there's some issue, how to handle the issue. That's where I come in as a judge.
Got it. And I know the idea behind being a judge is that you're supposed to be completely impartial, but obviously, and this is actually what attracted me to you first was I saw a reel that you created about how judges can't be political. So if somebody is asking you, about your personal political affiliations, you usually don't share that, I assume, with,
So it
friends and
is kind of
family.
ironic. We run on political tickets. In Texas, we have to run either as a Democrat or Republican. There's
Mhm.
no other option.
True, but also I guess in the political spectrum, it's a lot wider than, Democrat and Republican. I feel like in today's world, being a Democrat can mean so many different things, or
Yes,
being a
you're right.
Republican can mean so many different things. So I guess my question is, without trying to put you into a bucket of your political views, but I guess how, maybe in general, how do political views influence the way that the legal system works or the way judges work?
So we are impartial. There's no two
Mhm.
ways about it. It's black and white. We are to rule on the law. We are to, whatever the legislature has put in place is what we do. There is no outside parameters. Certain things are within my discretion. For example, if a child is particularly troublesome and we've done everything that we can to help that child, and maybe the state wants to send them to the Texas Juvenile Justice Department, where is a child prison. So I may intervene and say, no, let's put them in a placement service or a secured facility and see how they do and whether we can really help. At the end of the day, in regard to juveniles, especially, is rehabilitate. So anything in my power to help that process, I will step in and do. So those are within my discretionary powers. But overall, it's the rule of law that controls.
And has there ever been a time in your life where you kind of thought to yourself, I don't like this law?
I don't know if I ever particularly said that. I've always been an individual kind of like right, wrong, right, wrong. It's just not a, you know? So I think I've not had that issue
Mhm.
that I can't recall.
Yeah. It's interesting because, yeah, I mean, I understand like your job is to uphold the actual written law the way that it is written. And then I can also imagine situations where, I don't know, you read something that is written into law and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I do have to uphold this, but maybe it's conflicting.
I don't think that issue has specifically come up.
Mhm.
I mean, there have been instances where I had jury trials and I have questioned, like, what is the jury thinking per se when they have ruled a certain way, or when they have not ruled. I mean, when they have come back and said guilty or not guilty. I wonder why the jury did that. Like, there are question marks in my head about when there was a jury involved as to how they came to their decision.
Mhm.
But there are cases sometimes I wish they picked a jury instead of a bench trial as well,
Why do you say that?
because I am the final deciding factor in a bench trial, whereas a jury is responsible for deciding whether someone's guilty or not guilty, or someone is, or the punishment, or somebody's in a breach of a contract or not. So, in that sense, there is that varying factor in the US where there's a jury trial.
If somebody were in a situation where that they needed to go to court, how do they go? How does their lawyer go about making that decision if it should be a jury trial or a bench trial, or can they make that decision at all, or is it already set? How does that work?
No, it's definitely the attorney gets to decide whether it's going to be if it's a civil case, the plaintiff or the defense attorney can choose. And then also in the defense attorney usually, I mean, criminal cases are always mostly set on the jury trial docket.
Interesting. I've actually never served jury duty in the United States. I think
I've not
whenever the
either.
really okay.
I don't know if they would ever pick me as an attorney, because I don't, we have that process of voir dire where, for in my court, it's a panel of 6 that usually sits, unless if it's a felony case when it's a panel of 12 jurors. So we pick, if it's a 6-panel jurors, we have about 35 jurors that come into the courtroom, and the attorneys get to ask all sorts of questions, possibly even dive into their personal information to figure out who the best jurist for that case is. So I've not seen an attorney be picked. I've not seen a judge be picked. So it's very rare that if you're an attorney, because they don't want any sort of influence upon the jury panel as a whole. So I don't think a judge or a lawyer will ever be picked on a jury case, but it's still, it can happen.
It's so interesting. I don't know. Somebody recently was joking. It was a joke, but they said to me recently that they believe that politicians should be elected completely randomly. So everyone just goes into a pool, kind of like jury duty, and then you get called and you have to go be president for a
Please
couple
serve.
years.
That'd be interesting.
So it was definitely a joke when my friend was talking about it, but I guess I think about that with the context of jury duty. What do you think about the whole system, the way that it is, and random people getting called? Like, is it really kind of luck of the draw, or are people really putting a lot of care into it? How does it?
I think it has, I mean, it works. We had the jury system as far, I don't know when it originated, but we had the jury system as far as I know for quite a bit of time, and it has worked so far. And I'm sure it's probably, I have faith in the jurors that sit through cases and have to listen to testimony and facts and everything else in regard to a case and how they will rule.
Definitely. I do want to jump backwards though a little bit, and I want to talk just about the process of your campaign because I think a lot of people, when I was talking to another friend about this interview, a friend of mine here in Germany was confused. She didn't know that you had to like run to be a judge in the United States. So in that process, I guess when I think of elections, I always just think it's going to be incredibly expensive.
It is.
So I guess what is the process of, I guess, finding people to spend money on this, getting interest, campaign donations, like it kind of goes beyond like, oh, I'm good at my job and I want to be a judge. It's also kind of marketing yourself. So how was that process navigated?
The first time around, it was really grassroots. I mean, when I would walk into the grocery store, I would just start shaking people's hands and telling them my name and asking them to vote for me. So my oldest at the time was 12 years old, and I remember walking down the grape. I mean, I was some lady was looking at the bag of grapes, and I still remember it so clearly. I walked up to her, I shook her hand, and I gave my name, and I said, "Will you vote for me? I'm running for judge." So, that was embarrassing for my daughter. She ran. I mean, when I say dart, I mean, you should have seen that kid bolt. She was not having anything to do with me. And then it gets easier. I mean, there are elections one on one vote, and I was not about to leave any stone unturned. And I didn't rest. I would leave work, go home, feed the kids, and get out and just start going to events. If there's something locally, if there's some organization having a meeting, if there is anywhere, I would just start going and introducing myself to people because it was that important for me to win. Once you get elected, it's a little bit different. There is a part of me that's hesitant to go up and introduce myself to people now. Also, safety concerns. You never know I mean, there are times that I've come across people that's been in my court and I've had, and so I want to be careful. I'm not everybody's happy with you. Not everybody like the decision that you made for them or against them or however it be. So I'm a little bit more hesitant. So a lot of background, ads and social media, all those things have to be done. And it takes about, for my particular position, I believe last time around, I think I needed $150,000. So, and there is very much a fact that only rich people go into politics. And I was not rich. I'm a first generation in this country. So the first time around, it was grassroots and I did a lot of the work, but it's easier once you've been in a position to fundraise more money. And it's just something that has to be done. It's not a pleasant factor of asking people, family members, friends, hey, will you donate to my campaign? That's the one part I don't enjoy.
No, I think I would absolutely despise that part of it, but it's so important because like you said, when we first started talking about how, you wanted to represent the diverse community that you're in. So I guess when back in the early days, like the first time that you ran and you were pitching yourself to essentially strangers, what was kind of the positioning that you said? Was it like, I guess what was the selling point? Like what was the main pitch that you
I
had
mean,
for
people worrying, some people would stop and ask you, like, why do you believe you should be? And I would give my reasons. I would talk about the experience I had, things I saw as an attorney that I wanted changed in the county. There was quite a bit of backlog. So I wanted to move those cases along. I wanted to have cases set hearing quickly. In our county, it's that you would have to call and get a hearing date. Things like that needed to change. So I was able to talk about things that I myself saw as an attorney would be beneficial to the courts. And so those are the selling points that I did, and it worked out.
that it did?
But I mean, I also have to say that a judge before me, prior to me, she was the first female judge in the county and she was retiring. So both of us running on the tickets were brand new judges. So it helped in that as well, that aspect as well. And I wanted to run for this bench because she was the only female on the county court level in this county that I live in.
And are you still the only female on the bench in your county?
No. When I was elected, there were three of us who made it through. So three males and three females. And for the first time in history, it's a female majority. It's four females to two males.
And does that, I guess, does that make you feel a certain way, or does it mean something to you, or it's just, it is what
It
it is?
definitely does. I have three daughters. There should be nothing. If they choose to do something, it should be open to them.
Definitely.
So I'm very ecstatic about that it turned around like that.
And do you think though that that I guess the career path is moving that way? Or I'm asking because, I think it's interesting now growing up as a girl, like you get told that you can do anything because you can. And it has been paved and opened. And, now you see like young women out educating men. You see young women going into higher paying jobs. You see just women performing so much better than before or ever before. And I don't know, with politics, I kind of worry in the US that it's kind of going to start regressing. And so I guess I'm curious. Yeah.
I mean, there is some truth to that. I mean, in the sense that as much as we break through, sometimes I feel like we're going backwards as well. But it's continue to forge ahead. Like this morning, I went walking in a trail near my house along with a friend of mine who's a pilot. And every time I mention to somebody, oh, my friend who flies for this particular airline, they automatically assume it's a male. And, we were talking that the higher up that we go or the ladder that we climb, there's still there is still some areas that we have to overcome. She was at a training somewhere and the guy that was in charge of the organ or the overseeing the program was like, usually when I meet people from Texas, it's a Bob or a something Bob or a Ben or whatever. And so she is she's an Indian American woman who's not what he would have seen on a normal basis from Texas. So we are paving the way, and I hope we continue to pave the way. That there is no difference as to whether someone's a male or female as to what job they hold and what their capabilities are.
Certainly. Do you find that in general the Indian American community is very supportive of you in this growth, or has that been a big part of your process? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
The Indian American community, there are definitely some things that I continue to push against. And I'm glad to be in a position where I can push ahead. A lot of people sometimes, even within the Indian community, there are like people that didn't realize I was Indian. I was at an event and my daughter was with me, my oldest was with me, and they kept telling her, "You look so Indian, you look so Indian." And at the third time, the lady saying that, I said, "You realize I'm Indian American, right? And I'm Indian." And so I been to her house. She known me since before I was a judge, but at no point did she think I was Indian and I asked her why. And she said, "You just don't seem like a Indian female." And so I guess I come across very confident or assertive. And so for her, who's also very successful and has a career, I didn't fit that mold. And so I do fight against misogyny. I do fight against things that are very specific to my culture and community, but it has to be done. Will continue to do so till I can.
Curious though, specifically though, that's such a bizarre thing when somebody's like, you could be, Indian, and you're like, well, no,
A
I
lot of
yeah.
people confuse me for African American, islands, mixed, everything but sometimes. Even I've worn a sari or an Indian outfit, and it has happened multiple times. I remember one time I was walking to my friend's house for an event that he was hosting, and the person looks at me and said, you wear our outfit so well." Just because it's also mine. I don't know.
I mean, that's such a hard thing to do because I feel like, I obviously don't have the same experience, so I can't necessarily empathize, but I just imagine that I would just want to like smack someone if
I
they
mean,
did that.
but in the courthouse too, I remember once I was in front of a judge and the defendant didn't speak English. It was Spanish speaker. And the judge asked me, "Don't you know Spanish?" Like, are you not understanding? And I was like, no, Your Honor, I do not understand Spanish. I'm not a Spanish speaker. But he assumed, I guess, of my skin color and that I was Hispanic. So, but I've come to embrace the side of me. And because if I connect with you on a level beyond my heritage or my culture or my, um, ethnicity, then that's what makes me relatable. And for you to connect with me, then yes, absolutely. I take it as an advantage and not a disadvantage.
That's a good thing then. I'm interested though, when you mentioned the other friend who's a pilot, and people just kind of assume that she is a he. Does that ever happen to you? You know, if someone is talking about their friend, the judge, do you think that that's kind of an assumption that happens, or are there any funny
I'm
stories
sure.
where something expected?
Absolutely. The urban areas in Texas are very much diverse, and the rural areas are very much atypical. If I go to so next week I'm going to the annual judges conference in Texas, and the room is predominantly older white gentlemen. And the rural areas are very much what you typically would think of as a judge. When people see me, they are surprised. And also, they tell me, you're too young to be a judge, which, there's ageism as well. I may look younger, but I'm not that young. So I definitely had 15 years as an attorney and now my 7.5 years on the bench. So
Yeah,
I'm
I think
seasoned.
it's an interesting thing though, because yeah, I feel like women can't win. On one hand, it's like you're supposed to look young and fresh, but then if you look young and fresh, you're too young and fresh. So I don't know. I don't know what we're supposed to be.
Especially during COVID, I think I encountered some ageism probably, or I don't know. I've, wanted or required mask in the court, and some of the older attorneys didn't want to wear a mask in the court, and she's not going to tell me what I'm going to do and not do. And then, there's all sorts of those type of things once you get on the bench as well that you had to deal with as to, the decision that you make that they may not like, and then like who's she to tell me kind of thing is, all those type of things exist.
Definitely. Has there ever been a time where, you just kind of had to really dig in your heels? I guess the mask example at COVID is I assume quite a controversial one at the time where a lot of people in the US and globally actually were just not wearing masks. So is that something like in your courtroom, do you have the authority to tell people what they can and can't do? Or is
Yes,
it
I
like
do. So that's for certain. A judge does have control over his or her courtroom.
so what exactly does that control extend to? What are kind of the preferences that you can set down for your own court?
During COVID, it was that you had to have, in order to practice in my court, you had to have masks. So,
Mhm.
and that was within my purview and discretion. And so, yes, that was something that I did enforce.
Are there any other things that you enforce on the day to day now that COVID is over or
I mean, I'm not a fan of people coming into the courtroom chewing gum. I would prefer if people had on a blazer. I'm kind of relaxed on it. I really feel, respect. I mean, especially attorneys, not necessarily the defendants or plaintiff or defendant in my court, but just the attorneys itself. You're in this position. You had to work hard to get to where you are. Give respect to that position that you're in. You're an officer of the court. Have responsibility and a fiduciary duty to your client. Represent that client well in your best ability, your capacity as an attorney. So I would never have thought about walking as an attorney into a court wearing sandals or not ever wearing a suit or a jacket, and a dress. I've always held I want people, I think what you put out is important. Think how people, view you is important.
yeah, it's such an interesting topic, I think, of clothing in the workplace because yeah, absolutely the way people see that you are put together paints a picture of who you are and what you're about. But then on the other hand, I struggle with it because, those constructs were created like from a place of, patriarchy and
Understand? Yes.
so yeah, I don't know. Yeah, on one hand I
I
totally
think it's my mom who told me always look your very best. And I always do try. I mean, when I go on vacation, I wear whatever I want, but most of the time I'm very put together. I try my very best in to look my very best, for lack of a better word.
No, I mean, it makes sense. And also, yeah, when you're at, such a high position, I think it is important to show that, you take it seriously. But yeah, that's one of those topics that I go back and forth on for sure. So I am curious though, having been in this role for a long time and you're kind of settled into it, is there a limit to the number of terms that you can actually continue, or is
Not for
this
my position.
okay?
I can run every 4 years till however I choose. I do not intend to stay in this position. I do not want to be an elected official who dies in my position. I have no intention of staying past 60.
Is that because you want to retire, or is that
I'm retiring. At 60, I'm done.
okay, okay. Interesting. Okay. So that to me though is 60s I feel like a decent, quite early retirement age. So what
That
you
is when I'm eligible to retire and receive benefits. So I will be retiring at 60. No, unless if some drastic thing changes or I run for another position or something else happens in my life, my intention is that actually my youngest child, who's 8 now, will start college and I'm done.
that's totally fair.
I want to be able to travel the world. I've traveled, I think at this point I've been I think about 33 countries and I've just enjoy doing that and I want to be able to do it when I'm healthy enough, when there's people that retire, stay till the end to retire and then, a few months later they die. Like you never got to enjoy, that ages where you're climb Machu Picchu or like, I don't know, just do things that you would have not normally, your knees give out. Even now, when I wake up every morning, there's parts of me that hurt. And I'm like, what is this?
That's fair. I think if though, I don't know, it's sort of maybe not worth analyzing if for example you hadn't won the that first election, do you think that being a judge is something that you would have tried to like run for again, or um is there another career path within law that you would have explored?
I don't know. I mean, there's a few other positions that pique my interest that at some point or another I may consider. But the moment with our position as judges in our county, especially, if we ever actually say out of our mouths that we're interested in something, we lose our position. We would have to resign from our position. So that's not something I can do. But there are things that pique my interest at some point or another in my career I may consider. But I have to tell you this funny factor, and I don't know if you know Judge Judy. Do you know Judge Judy
Yeah.
on TV? When I was growing up in the 90s, I think, she came out in the 90s. That's when she first made the scene. These judge shows were just getting out there. But Judge Judy was the biggest at the time. And people who knew my personality, friends who knew my personality, would call me Judge Julie. And it used to drive me crazy. It used to bother me to no ends. And I used to just get very upset about it. But it became a reality. Like spoken word has some sort of power at the end of the day. Like I use Judge Julie because it's kind of people are familiar with Judge Judy and it kind of, like Judge Julie, it's just easier for them to remember me and remember my name when I use that. So
Is there, I guess,
it is.
between, because obviously what we see on TV, on daytime television, is not the reality of the world. I guess, is there anything that you almost wish reality was closer to the fun of daytime TV? Whether that's, lecturing someone or I don't know.
Daytime. I mean, I feel like sometimes I am in a reality show. Some of the things that happen in my court, I kind of have to step back and say, what in the world? Some of the stuff, it is very much like what you see on TV. And but there are times, most of it is actually boring. But with the criminal cases, there's definitely a factor that you have to do a reality check, or sometimes you look at yourself and realize how blessed you are and how blessed your kids are, especially the juveniles. They're born into a situation that they have no way out of, that I'm not surprised that they're in front of me for something particular because of the situation they were born into.
I think about that all the time, that literally, being born, I just got lucky. There's so many other lives out there that are being lived that, yeah, it's just so situational. For example, with your own children, do you feel like they're being raised with more or less privileges than you had growing up, or?
Definitely more, without a shadow of a doubt. I came to the US when I was 10 years old. I remember sleeping in a one-bedroom apartment on the floor with a stained mattress that the previous tenant left behind. I'm very My kids are definitely very, very blessed. They get to travel, they get to experience things, they go to grade school, there's a part of me that worries about it too. Are they tough enough to handle some adversities in life? How will they handle circumstances that they're not used to? I can live through almost anything. Even if I lose everything in life, I still would survive. But would my children be able to do that? And those are things I believe that I consider. And I make sure that they're exposed to everything, meaning we traveled to India, we traveled to Zambia recently, we went to Zimbabwe. Like, there's people that don't have the things that you have. And very much, you're very privileged and blessed with what you have. And I mean, I came from a upper middle class family in India to basically nothing in the US and had to build up. Uh, and only my parents were able to build up because they had an education. And I wonder, if some of the immigrant population may forget that the people in the US don't have, especially people in poverty in the US may not have anything to build from, because how do you build up sometimes from poverty, generational poverty? You're born into, like, you don't have an educational background to build from. You don't have the support system in place. We've had systemic racism in this country. We've had issues, slavery in this country. So how do you build up from it? And I've read somewhere, I think, I can't recall the report it was. I think it's like 20 or 40 years of absolutely nothing going wrong for individual to get out of poverty. And so I am definitely blessed with the hand that's been dealt in my life.
Hmm.
I've worked at, for example, when I wasn't in college, I worked at a car parts factory that these containers and crates would come from China, and you dismantle the parts and then you put it on a conveyor belt and you were packing those parts. So I worked in an assembly line packing parts for 10 hours, 12 hours a day. And I remember waking up and not being able for my foot to touch the floor because of how painstaking it was. It was like needles pricking my foot. So I know how hard people have it in life, and I've experienced it myself. And so whenever I say I'm blessed, I know I've walked through the difficult path to get here as well.
I think that, yeah, it shows that now, the situation has obviously improved. However, the empathy that's involved is something that's, I'm sure, still serving you every day. I am curious though, because you said that you moved to the US when you said 10 years old.
Yes.
What was that like for you at the age of 10? Was it just like, did you have like a life that you really missed when you were 10? I imagine, like, your whole world is just shook.
I mean, you left your friends, your family, my grandparents, my uncle. I was very attached to my dad's youngest brother. We went everywhere with him. My grandfather and his family had quite a bit of land. So it's like mango season. We would be going after the harvest in that, or sugar canes. We had like a lot of farmland that we owned. And so I missed that life. But coming to a country, yeah, America is like the land of milk and honey. So definitely very excited, very happy to have come. We first landed in Chicago. It was bitter, bitter cold in the middle of December. And then we moved to Pennsylvania, which was more, the ability to handle the cold in Pennsylvania is a little bit better. And so, you kind of forget what you left behind because you're looking forward to what's ahead. And so, uh, I made friends. Initially, it was very hard. I actually wrote a book, and I'm kind of figuring out how to finish the book and how to talking about what we went through and how it was, and just kind of a memoir. I just wanted to put down on paper the things I've gone through in life. And so I've not finished it yet. I have a friend who's an editor who's looking at it, trying to give me some insight into how to make it better. But it's been a process. And every time I touch it, there's an emotional side to it too, which is why sometimes I don't want to pick it back up and look at it and write it. There's a lot of injustices that we have dealt with as well. And there's things in my life that was heartbreaking. So at some point or another, I hope to finish this book that I can put it out there, kind of about overcoming odds, overcoming or struggles. And I tried to impart what I've learned over the years to the kids that come in front of my court. And I said, listen, the only way to change in life or to make something better or to do is to work hard. I mean, there's no way without hard work to accomplish goals that one may have for themselves. Or if you will have life throw curveballs, you will fall in life, you will fail in life, and it's you choose to get back up. There is no way to get through life without struggles and obstacles and choosing that I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it through. I'm going to take the next step. Sometimes it's taking that next breath. So at some point, I hope to have this book and put it out there.
I look forward to the day that it's published.
Thank you.
I'm curious too when you say hard work, for example, is the only way forward. I think, because definitely America's very like based in that like Protestant work ethic of like kind of it came from Calvinism of like, you work hard and then, God loves you and, you then find success. And the world that we live in now, is very different. And we talked a little bit about privilege earlier. So I'm curious kind of if you can elaborate a bit more on like hard work versus privilege versus, you know, are you optimistic that anyone can build out of a bad situation, or do you have kind of a negative viewpoint on it at times, or how do you reckon with that?
So tomorrow I can fall apart. It's just for I worked for some of the bigger credit card companies in the country. I worked for American Express, I worked for Discover Bank. And sometimes when I'm going, especially after like I had to collect on $1 million accounts and things, and I always wondered how did they get there? And it's very simple. Tomorrow you can have a catastrophic event in life, whether it be health or some sort of financial setback, and you're in the hole. Sometimes it's easier, especially if you have the educational background to build from that. But I've sometimes it may not be. You may not be able to, but making the best out of your life in the current situation that you're in, striving or aiming or setting a goal is, in my opinion, I mean, the only way to do it. I don't know if every time everyone will be successful, but keep trying. I mean, you're going to fail. I've had plenty of failures in life. A lot of people don't know this. I was a single mom with a 10-month-old. For a long time, I was by myself raising her in a different state than where my parents were with no family background or help or any of these things. So it was not easy. There were a lot of times I wanted to quit. There was a lot of times that I was at the end of my rope and I felt like this isn't going anywhere and I wanted to give up. But I kept saying, kept hoping, kept praying, kept pushing myself to just keep going. Sometimes it is that next step.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's all you can kind of do in life is there's always just one step, one foot in front of the other.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I often think about that. I guess maybe more from the perspective of kind of how you described your kids getting to grow up within privilege. And, I didn't grow up like, super rich or anything. It was just like a very normal, like well-adjusted childhood. Yeah, sometimes I hear just stories of things that people have gone through, and I think to myself, no way, I could never do that. Do you ever, I guess, look back in the process of writing this book and think to yourself, how did I get through this situation?
I remember going through those situations, which is why sometimes I have a hard time to go back and sit down and then put it on paper because of how emotional it still is. And there may be trauma that I'm still dealing with. We all carry around a certain amount of trauma in our life. Not a single one of us are immune from it. So, yes, absolutely. Yes, to your question.
Fair. And I guess through the process of, you know, growing up, moving and just all of that comes with adolescence. Because you had mentioned earlier that you are sometimes told like, you could be Indian, and you're like, well, no, I am, in the U.S. But then
And
does
then
that?
the other thing is my name is Juli Mathew. Then they want to know how come you don't have an Indian name? And then, then I have to go through the whole process of where I come from in India is, one of the disciples of Christ, St. Thomas, was shipwrecked off the coast of Kerala. And so four families converted at the time in the year 52, AD 52. It's not something I changed my name when I came to the US. I was born Julie. My maiden name is Thomas. My husband's last name is Matthew. Therefore, I took it on when I married him. So all of those things. And then even within the Indian community, there's sometimes like, oh, there's various, I mean, there's people are, how do I don't know. And I'm just going to stop there actually on that one.
Okay. Yeah. No, nobody's trying to stir the pot in any community. But I do think annoyance, I've been repeating this to myself recently. I think annoyance is the price you pay for community. And so um
There's people that's going to get under your skin and say things,
yeah, always. But yeah, they can still be a part.
regardless of who you are.
But does the same thing happen to you when, for example, you go back you said that you were back in India recently. Do you
Years
then
ago,
have,
yes.
friends and family there saying, "No, now you're full American," or like, "Now
I
you're"
think I've always sometimes I feel like I'm not sure if I belong either one. Like I have a certain amount of accent when I speak English here and there some words. And then I have very much an accent when I speak my native tongue as well. So I'm kind of, equal footing. But definitely I'm very much a very contemporary, modern individual. I'm very much true to my core as someone I believe in my faith very deeply. And that's because it has helped me overcome certain situations in life. But I think that that whole core of like right and wrong or that I've been raised as a kid helped me in the decisions I made and in the becoming who I am and what I am. So I don't know if that makes sense per se, but
I think it does. You're from yeah, in a way, you're from all the places and experiences that made you.
yes.
I'm curious though, if somebody asked you, like they don't know you at all, I don't know, you're on a holiday in the middle of nowhere and somebody asks you, "Oh, where are you from?" How do you answer that question?
Definitely US. But the funny part is when we're around the world or when we're traveling, people will always say namaste.
Mhm.
So they already know I'm Indian. So it's not like, but I am an American. There's no other thing but that. Yes.
Interesting.
My cultural heritage is Indian.
I think that as I've because I've lived abroad for so long, yeah, I don't really feel identified with America anymore, but at the same time, I always answer American when somebody asks where I'm from, so it's just yeah, I always think it's an
But I get
interest
asked that all the time here. And I know there are people that get offended at that question. I honestly don't. I am actually okay with people asking me, where are you from? But I would prefer it if people would ask me, what's your ethnicity? That makes more sense. Or where's your cultural background? Or something along those lines as opposed to where you're from.
Yeah, definitely. I think where are you from and what do you do? Or like the top 2 questions whenever we meet someone new, and I'm trying my best to change it. But before we wrap it up, I just super appreciate your time. Is there anything that you wanted to touch on or any topic that, you wanted to bring up that we didn't get to, or whether that's about, being a judge or um, a
I think
community member or
I mean, the only thing I think you actually asked me the question where I say keep going, regardless of your struggles or your obstacles or whatever you're facing in life. It's temporary. You just keep fighting, just keep breathing, just keep taking the next step. That is all that is my motto of life. I will say this. One of my experiences in life, I didn't know how to ride a bike till I was in college. And I learned to ride a bike in Netherlands. And the reason I learned to ride a bike is because my professor's wife taught me how because there was a bike tour that the class had to do and you had to learn how to obviously ride a bike to do the bike tour with the rest of the class. So my professor's wife took it upon herself to teach me how to ride a bike. And when this stayed with me. I actually touched base with her maybe after I became a judge. I found her. She actually lives in Texas. And Mrs. Block told me, look ahead where you want to go rather than look down where you're currently at. So my thing is look ahead, always focus ahead, and you'll get to where you're meant to be in life.
I think that's excellent advice. Well, Judge Julie, thank you again. This was a wonderful conversation.